The elegant restaurant was unusually busy that afternoon. Sunlight poured through the enormous windows, reflecting off the polished tables and creating a warm glow across the dining room. Emily Carter, a young waitress with long, wavy brown hair, moved between tables wearing her white blouse and red apron. She had been working there for almost 2 years. And although the restaurant was expensive, Emily had never allowed the wealthy customers to make her feel less important. She was supporting her younger brother through college, so every shift mattered. That afternoon, a distinguished middle-aged man named Richard entered the restaurant wearing an expensive royal blue suit. He looked confident, but there was something nervous in his eyes. He sat at Emily's table and ordered coffee. After a few minutes, he leaned toward her and quietly whispered, "You need to leave this restaurant before tonight." Emily froze. "What?" she whispered. Richard glanced toward the other tables. "Don't ask questions. Just trust me." Emily looked confused. "Why are you telling me this?" Richard's expression became serious. "Because you're in danger and you don't even know it." Before Emily could ask anything else, Richard placed his hand gently on her shoulder and whispered, "Look behind you, but don't make it obvious." Emily slowly turned her eyes toward the dining room. At another table sat a huge, muscular, bald man with a gray beard and tattooed arms. He wore a black motorcycle vest and had been watching them for several minutes. Emily's heart began beating faster. "Who is he?" she asked. Richard replied, "His name is Victor. He believes you have something that belongs to him." Emily shook her head. "I don't have anything." Richard leaned closer. "That's what makes this dangerous. You don't know what you have." Emily remembered something strange that had happened the previous night. While cleaning one of the private dining rooms, she had found a small black envelope underneath a chair. Inside was a tiny key and a photograph of 3 men standing outside a warehouse. She had planned to give it to management, but she had forgotten it inside her locker. Richard seemed to read the fear on her face. "You found something, didn't you?" Emily whispered, "How do you know?" Richard looked toward Victor. "Because I was the one who lost it." Before Emily could respond, Victor suddenly stood up and began walking toward them. Emily's hands trembled as Victor approached. He moved slowly, but every step made her more nervous. Richard immediately stood between Victor and Emily. "Victor, sit down," he said firmly. Victor stopped and stared at him. "You shouldn't be here, Richard." Richard replied, "Neither should you." Emily realized that these 2 men knew each other. Victor looked past Richard toward her. "Give me the key." Emily shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about." Victor's expression hardened. "Don't lie to me." Richard stepped closer. "Leave her alone." Victor laughed bitterly. "You still think you can protect people?" Emily suddenly understood that the situation was much bigger than a missing key. Richard quietly told her that he had once worked for a private security company that had been involved in a serious financial scheme. Victor had been one of the men responsible for moving stolen money through secret accounts. Richard had discovered the operation and tried to expose it. The evidence had been hidden inside the restaurant by someone who knew that Victor's group was searching for it. Emily had accidentally found the evidence because the restaurant's private room had been used for secret meetings. "Why me?" Emily asked. Richard answered, "Because they think you took the evidence." Victor suddenly reached toward Emily, but Richard pushed his arm away. Several customers stood up, frightened by the confrontation. The restaurant manager called security. Victor looked around and realized he couldn't cause a scene without attracting police attention. Before leaving, he pointed at Emily. "You have until tonight. Bring me the key, or someone you love will pay the price." Emily's face went pale. Victor walked out. Richard immediately turned toward her. "We need to get you somewhere safe." Emily shook her head. "My brother is at home." Richard nodded. "Then we're going there first." But Emily suddenly remembered the photograph inside the envelope. One of the men in the picture looked familiar. She had seen him several times entering the restaurant through a private entrance. "Richard," she whispered, "I know where the rest of the evidence is." He looked at her in surprise. "Where?" Emily pointed toward the restaurant's wine cellar. "There's an old storage room behind it. The man in the photograph has been going there every Friday." Richard realized they might finally have enough evidence to expose Victor's entire operation. Together, they carefully entered the storage area while security kept watch. Behind a loose wooden panel, they discovered a metal box containing documents, photographs, account records, and a list of names. Richard immediately contacted the authorities, but before they could leave, they heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. Emily and Richard froze as the footsteps grew louder. The storage room door slowly opened and the restaurant manager appeared. For a moment, Emily thought he had come to help them. Then she noticed the fear in Richard's eyes. "He's one of them," Richard whispered. The manager stepped inside and locked the door behind him. "You should never have found this," he said. Emily stepped backward while Richard held the metal box tightly. The manager demanded the documents. Richard refused. Suddenly, loud footsteps and voices echoed from outside. Police officers had arrived. Richard had secretly activated an emergency alert before entering the storage room, sending the location and evidence to the authorities. The manager tried to escape, but security officers stopped him. Victor was arrested outside the restaurant shortly afterward. The investigation that followed uncovered a large financial operation involving stolen funds, secret accounts, and several people who had been using the restaurant for private meetings. The evidence Emily accidentally discovered became the key to exposing the entire scheme. Weeks later, the restaurant reopened after the investigation. Emily returned to work, but everything felt different. Customers who once ignored her now treated her with respect. Richard visited one afternoon and thanked her. "You were incredibly brave," he said. Emily smiled. "I was terrified," Richard replied. "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't afraid. It means you keep going anyway." Emily looked toward the table where Victor had once sat. She remembered how frightened she had been when he threatened her brother. But she also remembered something important. She had trusted her instincts and refused to hand over the evidence. Her brother was safe, the criminals were facing justice, and the stolen money was being returned to its rightful owners. Before leaving, Richard handed Emily a small envelope. Inside was a letter offering her a position with his security and investigations company. Emily smiled but shook her head. "Thank you, but I think I like being a waitress." Richard laughed. "After everything that happened?" Emily smiled. "Someone has to notice when customers leave things under tables." They both laughed. Emily returned to work, but she never forgot the lesson. A person doesn't need power, wealth, or authority to make a difference. Sometimes courage belongs to the ordinary person who notices something wrong and decides not to look away. The little key Emily had found beneath a restaurant chair had seemed worthless at first, but it eventually unlocked the truth behind an entire criminal operation, and the tattooed stranger who had frightened everyone in the restaurant became the very reason Emily learned how powerful courage could be. The end.